All right, so you've thought about how capitalism has affected your life in some way. Let's review the development of capitalism. And I know we've covered this before, so I won't go too much into this, but just a reminder that we moved from this barter system into the social construction of money, right? So when we're thinking about money, again, it's a symbol. And so next week, when we talk about culture, we're going to talk about that symbolic sort of representation of these different cultural aspects that are huge parts of our everyday lives. These dollar bills, euros, right, whatever it is that you might use, it doesn't inherently hold any sort of weight, right? Like maybe you could get some money for a little piece of paper, but it's just cents, right? It's not the equivalent of a $50 bill, $100 bill, right? Whatever it might be. So we have decided as people that this little piece of paper or this little piece of metal, if it's a coin, means this other thing. And so it's a trust system that we have developed around this monetary field. So in the past, we've moved from feudalism where individuals used to work for protection. And so that was their payment. It wasn't these slips of paper. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a digital deposit into your bank account that you literally never see. It was you were paid by, the Lord that you worked for in being given the resources you need to survive. So food, shelter, water, right? But then we saw the agricultural and industrial revolutions, and this was when the bourgeoisie, or those who were able to afford the means of production, started to realize that, okay, we can exploit labor. We can't really exploit these other things. So if we're paying people in food and shelter, right, it's not as profitable for us. If we can pay them in money, society starts to sort of value money more and more. And if they need money to survive, when we're moving away from this feudal system where they have to fend for themselves now, they're not being paid in food or water or whatever, we can actually profit even more off of that. And so that's partially why we see these revolutions, along with, of course, the technological innovations, the perceived need to be able to create more and more of whatever it is, food or guns or, whatever it is that you're creating, and being able to make them more efficiently and more quickly. So there are a lot of things that go into these revolutions, but the social consequence is this move from feudalism into capitalism. So we've got these new technologies, things like the plow, right? Things that make it so that people can create more faster. But we also get this wage labor system. So no longer are people working directly for the things they need to survive, right? They're now working for the symbol that allows them to purchase the things they need to survive. And that's an important key concept when we're talking about capitalism. So we've got some differing views on whether capitalism is a good thing for society or a bad thing for society. We've obviously talked about Marx and Engels. They're on the right. These guys are pretty anti-capitalist, pro-communist. So, we've already covered a little bit of what they think about what capitalism does to us as individuals, and we're going to go into that a little bit more, but also what it does to us in groups, and why the bourgeoisie have a stake in developing these false divisions, right? Making us feel like we are divided along these other lines that, to someone like Marx or Engels, who really sees class as being the biggest divide in our society, or the most crucial divide, that those things are just distractions, but they're important distractions to keep those in power in power. These guys over here who are pro-capitalism are philosophers, economists, Adam Smith, who's been called the father of capitalism, the father of economics, and George Simmel. So we'll go through a couple of these different views here. So Adam Smith, he thinks that capitalism is awesome because with capitalism, we're able to specialize more and more. So what Adam Smith sees is that, back in the day of feudalism, someone had to focus their energy on creating a whole product, right? And not just a whole product, but a whole system of products. And so individuals couldn't really specialize because they didn't have time to learn those specific, kind of nuanced, um, detailed ways of doing something. They just had to get something done, right? It wasn't really about improvement or innovation on a particular component of creating that product or doing that task. It was like, yeah, I need to be able to whatever cook this meal so that my kids can eat. It wasn't. They couldn't really focus on how do I enhance the flavor profile, right? So it's like they couldn't focus so much, um, and so Smith sees capitalism as beneficial because it it essentially allows for specialization. We are put into these roles where we are given a small task, um, whatever our role is in the productive sphere of society. And we have the opportunity to get really good at that task because we do it over and over again. And essentially, we have the opportunity to see how that might be done more efficiently. So if you think about your intended role in society, whatever you want to be, if you want to be a nurse, if you want to be a teacher, right? You might think about the ways that because you're only doing that thing, you'll probably start to learn, um, tricks to make that easier. You might even also contribute back to the system and say, hey, I think it would be better, site-wide if we would all approach this task in this way. So anyway, that's kind of Smith's take here. So the example that I thought of was kind of making a movie. If you imagine if someone decides to make a movie and they have to act in it, they have to produce it, they have to edit it, right? First of all, it's going to take forever for that movie to be made. And second of all, they just need to be able to do each of those tasks well enough to get it done, right? So it's probably not going to be the best movie that you've ever seen. But today we don't have people making movies like that, right? The Hollywood blockbusters that we pay to see, we're seeing actors who are very skilled at their craft, editors who are, the best in the field, right? So every person in that chain has been able to get really good at what they do and then allow us to go, pay whatever ridiculous amount of money it costs to go see a movie these days. Well, I guess we can't even do that right now, but sometime in the future we'll be allowed to go to a movie theater. And we can see this incredible production, right? Because everybody has been able to specialize. And this comes from this concept of Taylorism. So this guy here, Frederick Winslow Taylor, he was hired during the Industrial Revolution to go into these different factories and scientifically analyze these very minuscule moments that could be shredded from the factory line timeline. And that was basically to figure out, okay, we can produce X percent more, whatever it is that we're making, if we can shred this 1 second off of this movement that this worker has to do. So his whole deal was, let's set up the assembly line in the most efficient way possible so we're not wasting any time at all. And this concept of wasting time, that's really a capitalist thought, right? Like it's this idea that time is money and the capitalists cannot profit off of quote unquote wasted time. And so that's why people would pay a lot of money to hire this guy, Taylor. And so Adam Smith, thinking about specialization, was really building off of these Taylorist concepts. So, of course, there's also the barter system that we just talked about, where money develops, but it relies on trust, right? It's a social construction. Money does not hold meaning in and of itself, does not hold value in and of itself. And Smith thinks this is a really good thing for society. He thinks that it's an enhancement of the social contract because now we all have to trust each other. We have to trust that we're going to share in our belief about this thing. And it allows for these different social bonds that we didn't have before. So we're all able to exchange money in a way that back in feudal times, we didn't really necessarily have to interact with so many people, but now we do because we're so specialized. We need all these different individuals in their various roles. And so he thinks that this is enhancing socialization in some ways. And then, of course, his biggest piece here is about competition. He thinks that people are driven by competition to make money. So he thinks that because we are inherently competitive with each other, that's how innovation occurs, because we want to do better. We want to create this better product, but that's because we want to make more money than our peers, right? We're driven by this sort of power, this ego. But he thinks that that's a good thing because we're going to eventually end up with these amazing technologies that really help to improve our day-to-day lives. So that's sort of his take on why capitalism is a good thing. I'm gonna pause the video here and we'll restart with Simil in the next video.